Thank you all for coming. So let me try to understand first how the room is. So who of you has ever done a transaction on chain, maybe on a decentralized exchange? Can you raise your hand? All right, many people still having to do on-chain transactions, I see. So what's your main, can I ask what's your main expectations from tonight? What you would like to hear, why you are here in simple words, just simple sentences? What are you? Someone else? What's the main topics you hope to hear about tonight? Oh yes, that's a very good topic. All right. So how many of you have heard of crypto just in the last year versus being here from a long time? Who has done anything in crypto in 2022 or 2021? All right, that's good. Cool. So thank you. Thank you for coming. We hope to stimulate your interest today and to make sure that you understand more about decentralized finance. This is not going to be about centralized transactions or about how to get basically the most out of whatever is happening in the market. We are here to talk about technology. We hope you are going to enjoy the topics that we are going to talk about. And we have our lead smart contract developer here, which is a very young folk, which just graduated, and we are very happy to going to share with you how you can also have your own path in this sector, which is extremely interesting, always open. And the key to this business is that you are never too early or never too late. You just have to start. Whenever you get into the sector, it's the right time for you, especially people as young as you all are. You can definitely be able to make a career or have your single space in this sector. So we'll just get it started now. Thanks. So yeah, I'm Davide Fai from Trader Joe, the general manager of the Decentralized Exchange. And we have...
I'm Luis, the lead smart contract engineer of Trader Joe, as said earlier.
So Trader Joe is a one-stop shop decentralized trading platform. One-stop shop means that many solutions are offered on the platform, and these solutions are the capability of swapping tokens with basically swapping from one token to another. We have farms, which are capabilities to get more tokens out of a position. We have a lending protocol called Banker Joe, where you can lend and borrow tokens. We also have an NFT marketplace called JoePegs, where you can buy, sell, participate to launches of NFT collections. We also had done many launches as launch pads, meaning a token listing happening in that moment. People participate to the launchpad of this project and contribute towards their launch. And we are here today to talk about the decentralized exchange, which is the main focus of the topic today. So what is a decentralized exchange? Let's start with this topic. When you have one token, let's imagine a Bitcoin, and you have it in your wallet, which let's also maybe touch a bit of the point on wallet. So when you have a token on Binance.com, like on the main platform. You're actually on a centralized exchange. When you have a token in your wallet, you are doing self-custody. Self-custody means that you have the actual tokens in your wallet and you own it. No one can take it away from you, and you possess it. Nothing can happen to it as long as you do proper self-custody. So we invite, and the industry has shown with past events related to, for example, FTX exchange or similar, that not your key, not your coins, means that instead of owning tokens on a centralized exchange like Coinbase, FTS, as it was Binance or others, what we are here to push as a decentralized exchange is self-custody, self-ownership of the tokens you have in your wallet and the capability to exchange them on-chain. So on-chain is actually the key of why we are all here. Crypto will be nothing without a blockchain. Bitcoin as a blockchain. Ethereum was the first blockchain that created smart contracts, which is the reason why many projects exist on this planet right now, and why every one of you can have a chance to work in DeFi thanks to smart contracts, actually, because one of the many saying of Bitcoiners is they buy and hold. So I'm in Bitcoin, I buy and I hold. That's different. What we do here is that we are a company, we are a software. Our piece of software lives on the blockchain, and by living on the blockchain means that code is low and every transaction can happen on-chain thanks to this code that has been written on the blockchain and everyone can interact with. So when you go on TraderJoeXYZ.com, you can make a transaction of one of your token with another token, as this interface shows. For example, here we are trying to swap 10,000 Joes to the USDC, which is a stable coin, and that swap is going to happen on-chain by exchanging your token A to your token B. And you end up with a transaction that is paid with gas fees, which is the native currency of the blockchain. So for example, if you are on Ethereum, you pay a transaction with a bit of Ethereum. If you are on Avalanche, you pay a transaction with a bit of AVAX tokens, and so on. Every blockchain has their own cost to write a transaction. To write a transaction on the blockchain, you need to pay for this fee, and the transaction is written permanently on the blockchain, and it's immutable. You cannot change it. As soon as it has happened, the transaction was executed, and you end up with the token you are desiring to have. So we are here to talk about decentralized exchanges, these models, what are decentralized exchanges, and how the model has evolved over time. So I would like then to hand over the conversation to the standard AMM model, which today can be defined as X times Y equals K. To Louis, that can tell you more about it.
Yeah, indeed. So Uniswap v2 is one of the most used smart contracts in like every EVM blockchain. It allows to, as David said, exchange one token for another. And everyone knows about Uniswap v2 here, or like, do I need to explain just a bit? No, it's fine. Okay, great. So like, it just allows to add liquidity. So for example, right there, you are actually adding 10,000 Joe with 2K5 USDC. And when you move on that curve, you have the old position and the new position. This will actually say how much token you will get from the swap and how much token you need to send to the pool so that it's like a real swap. Because when you move on that curve, the price is just following that curve, and that's how UniV2 works. It's a good model because it's very easy to understand. Once you understood that curve, you basically understood everything of UniV2. So that's what's the key point of it. But one of the worst part of it is that a lot of the actual liquidity, so that all the one that you've seen on top, like the left and on the right side, is in fact useless for this swap that you can see. And the best example is for like stable swap. When you swap USDC for USDT, it's supposed to be 1-to-1. And so you will be always using the same proportion of the curve, and all the rest of the curve is like literally useless and not used for their liquidity. And that's how the concentrated liquidity model became a thing. It was the idea to remove the liquidity that is in fact useless and just sit there for nothing.
So may I ask you, what happens when a swap happens on this curve? So on Trader Joe for a long time and many other decentralized exchanges, we have models of prices that use this curve. What happens when a user buys a token or sells a token specifically on that curve? And what's the difference for liquidity providers that put their token? Like, what is liquidity providing specifically, a bit more in detail?
So like when you actually swap, you're increasing the value. Like if you swap Joe for USDC, for example, you will actually add Joe to the pool and take some USDC from the pool itself. So it's kind of if you add two buckets, one with a lot of USDC and one with a lot of Joe, and you take some Joe out when, I mean, in that example, we were swapping. So like you are taking some USDC out and bringing some Joe in the bucket. And the real price of the token is actually the bucket of USDC divided by the bucket of Joe, and that's how UniV2 works. And that gives you a price. So when you are actually taking out some USDC and adding some Joe, the price is in fact decreasing for Joe and increasing for USDC.
Yeah, the constant sum formula, this is called, and the, no?
It's XYK. Constant sum formula is the concentrated one.
Right. And basically what we achieve, what this formula achieves when the constant is the end of the, when you put liquidity, in this case 10,000 Joes and $2,300, what you have is the constant of the value of these two tokens that you have put in the liquidity pool. This means that if someone swaps some, let's say 10% of the Joe pool, the opposite side, the value of the Joe token changes because you are changing the proportion of the Joe token within the pool, but you are still having the same value as the end result, as the constant, right?
Yes.
All right, let's move on maybe to what innovations are.
That's just the formula if you are curious about it. How much token you will get from how much token you send. It's just about the reserves and how much you send. And this formula works well, but if you actually do try with some numbers, if you do a swap with 10% of the reserves, you will get 9% out. So that's the price impact, and that's why it's not really great.
It's very small. Next time, do it huge.
Yeah. Do I need to write it like bigger?
Say it. Read it. Maybe.
Oh, so it's just xn time reserve out divided by reserve in plus x in, and it's assuming zero fees. If you want to have the fees in, you need to change the x to x times the fee. But yeah, that's.
So why is this inefficient?
Like if you send 10% of the reserves as the X in, you will get only 9% out. So like if you send 10K with a reserve being 100K, you will end up with 9K, like 10 or something like that, but like, let's forget about it. So like you are losing 10% of it if you do big swaps. And so this model is inefficient for especially stable coins, because they are like supposed to be one-to-one. So if you swap one stable to another, you will actually lose a lot of money because of the price impact using the V2 formula. And yeah, that brings us to liquidity book. That the idea is to remove this issue. And so we add the previous curve. And as I said, this is where the 1-1 is. So that means when you have one token, you will get when you send one USD, you will get one USDT back, and it will just move in that curve. So you are getting less and less when you move to that curve. And the idea with concentrated liquidity is just to remove the unused parts, so these parts, and just use this. And liquidity book is actually discretizing this. So instead of having an actual curve, you're doing the step function like that. And when you are like here, it's the one-to-one price. It means that in that range, sorry, so in this range, you will actually swap one-to-one without any price impact. That was the idea of LB and how it how it was designed and why it was designed like that. And then the fact is to add beans in it, and a bean is just the actual step. So this is one bean, this is another bean, and etc. So you have a lot of beans, and we love the beans. And the idea is that within a bean, as it's a discretized model, you have the same price. So it means that inside this specific bean, you are swapping one-to-one. And then when there is no more liquidity, so when you emptied this reserves of the token, you will go to the next one, which is this one, for example. And now it's like 1,2,0999 or something like that. But like this model is very efficient because you don't have to provide liquidity to all the function, the curve, sorry. And you can actually even provide more in these beans, in this bean, or like the range that you want. And you just specify how much of liquidity you want to provide everywhere. And so in the end, if we use another one, which is the liquidity, and here it's the price, the idea with a stable coin, as I said earlier, you will want something like that, because it means you have a lot of liquidity in the one section, so the price where you can swap one-to-one, and less when it diverges to the side. And that's like a Gaussian function. And it's one of the most used one for stablecoin, of course, and for other coins as well.
So let's go back to the big pictures so that everyone maybe can see it one step at a time. So when we look at these liquidity charts, what are we showing and what are the initial steps of why there are different colors in these specific liquidity shapes?
So like each beans represent a price. So like like if we do the one here in that function, it will be the one blue and red will be this one, and it will be just like this being the liquidity, so not really the nicest shape. Whatever. Yeah, I forgot what was the question.
So what we see on the chart on the left, one second, I think it's off.
You need to talk close. Oh no, it's dead. Just
when we look at the chart on the left, for example, what we see is the fact that liquidity can be staked vertically from multiple people. So when you stake liquidity vertically, it means that multiple liquidity providers can offer their liquidity at a different price point without necessarily having to offer it across an entire range. But what we see to the picture on the right is how the active bean, so the active price of a given token behaves, and how liquidity is hypothetically distributed in a case where you have liquidity on the left, which is token A, and liquidity to the right, which is token B. You have token Y and X, sorry. And when you deploy liquidity on the left side, you are basically offering liquidity for the token Y, which is the left side. So it will be the direction of the price in case the current market will go down, or better saying left in this chart, while the active bin, the central bin, is the only one with both tokens in the specific bin. And this means that that's the active price where users are making swaps. And when one of the two tokens is emptied from the current active bin, price moves either to the left or to the right based on which token is not available anymore at the current price point, and it moves to the closest bin, changing the active price. We have an example here of today's chart, for example. So maybe you can explain a bit more using this graph what we are seeing here.
So we are seeing here on the upper chart the distribution of liquidity with the right one and the left one. So the left one is only USDC and the right one is only AVAX, while the one in the middle, which is the active bin, is both. Meaning that when you're actually swapping, you first swap through the active bin, and then let's say you are buying AVAX for USDC, you will slowly go to the right to buy all the liquidity, and then push to the right. So that will increase the price. But when you are inside the active bin, as we are using the constant sum formula, which is this one, not very big, maybe whatever. So this is the constant sum formula, which means that within one bin, P is constant, so that you can swap X to Y at a constant rate until the bin is empty. So it means if, for example, if the current bin has 100K of liquidity, if you are swapping only 10K, you will have actually zero price impact, and you will just receive exactly how much you gave in dollar value, but in Y token. And that's why this formula is great, not the right word, but whatever. And so if we compare it to the previous model, it was just when you swap, so when you buy or sell, you would just move to that curve, and you would have had a price impact, which would have been probably 1% or something like that. So you would have ended up with less in Y value of Y in dollar value than what you gave in X. And with liquidity book, you're actually getting the exact same dollar value, which with both. And that's what's great when you're swapping. And for the liquidity providers, you're actually gaining a lot of fees, because when you swap in that active bin, as the price doesn't move, you can do a lot of like buy and sell, and they will generate a lot of fees, which will just be redirected to you. And as you are concentrated the liquidity, you're gaining way more fees than what you were winning with the previous model. And in fact, the liquidity provider are winning more than what they had before with the V2 model when we incentivized it. So that's great, because you are actually gaining more than what you had before when you had incentivized.
So you touched the point of fees, which is very interesting as a liquidity provider. So let's get one step back into this also. Providing liquidity means that you are providing token Y and X on the blockchain. So you have these two tokens, you put them on a liquidity pool, and you offer them to the market in order to trade with your liquidity back and forth around the price points that you are selecting, talking about concentrated liquidity specifically. So you first need to have the tokens, you need to put them into a liquidity pool, and then you become a liquidity provider. Why do people become liquidity providers? Because they want to earn fees. So each market on a decentralized exchange earn fees. While holding tokens on a centralized exchange will give you nothing, you actually pay fees to make transactions on a centralized exchange. On a decentralized exchange, by providing liquidity in a pool, you earn fees instead. These fees are set by smart contracts. So whenever a transaction happens, in this specific case, in any single bin, the protocol, the decentralized protocol, charges a transaction to the swapper. So if you are swapping $10,000 to 10,000 Joe tokens, the fee, if there is a fee of 0.3%, this fee is given to the liquidity provider that gave liquidity to the liquidity pool in order to allow this swap. As we see here at the bottom part, for example, in the bins traded, currently the price above is 17.63, which is very far here to the right. 1763 is actually there. So that's the active bin right now, but the trading volume happened during the last 24 hours, actually a lot of price ago, if we can say like that, because what we can assume from this specific volume chart is that a lot of trading activity happened in the range 16.3 to 16.7, and then somehow quickly moved way to the right, and this is all the volume that happened in the specific range. As a liquidity provider, it would have been great, for example, for a year to provide liquidity across this specific range for as long as the price was there, because all this volume was earning the liquidity provider fees that they were accruing for their position. Now that the price moved all over to the right, they have suffered technically impermanent loss, which is a very complex topic in the space. So we are just going to just mention it without making it a big conversation today. But impermanent loss quickly means that if your position was on that range, but now the active price is there, theoretically, you are suffering this impermanent loss, which is impermanent until it's realized, because your position was offered in this specific range. So what happened to your tokens between that price points and the further right is a potential loss in the valuation of the tokens you have provided. There is so much to read and to know about impermanent loss, so we are going to leave it for a potential question and answer in case you are curious. So we just skip through this. But what we wanted to specify here is that every single bin is a price point above here, as we are seeing. Whenever the price moves from one bin to the other, fees are collected for the liquidity providers and price is moving.
So will having liquidity change the price?
So liquidity being emptied in the single bin changes price. So let's imagine that the central one, green and violet, has $10,000 of token, and I buy $10,000 of the token. The bin will move from that one to the right one because I took away all the tokens from that single bin, so I increased the price. And That's actually how the protocol calculates what the current price is and the price that is offered to end users. This is specifically related to one single protocol, of course. Let's also add that if that will only happen, for example, on our DEX, but on other chains or on other markets, the market doesn't agree that the price should be there, arbitrageurs call market make the bin by selling back the token and reestablishing what the price is, let's say, worldwide across all potential markets. So the DEX only knows the liquidity that is available on its specific DEX. If there will be no liquidity, zero liquidity, we will then not be able to make any price, and we could not tell what the price is. It's the free market that is deciding, in this case, that 17.63 is the current price, even though volume and liquidity might have been less. Market makers, market participants, arbitrageurs, retail users wanted to buy tokens so that the price is now set to that value, and that represents for the decentralized exchange the current price. Everything on the left or right will happen only through market dynamics. We don't tell what the price is, the market tells what the price is.
Can I just interrupt people, like, if you use a DEX before, like Uniswap or Twitter, like, raise your hand. How about if you've, like, added liquidity before Uniswap V2? Okay, how about, like, Uniswap V3, like, much liquidity kind of swap? No, right? Okay.
How many of you are finding this interesting?
How many of you like
So what are your thoughts on these topics so far? What are you feeling about the sector? Well, like, what are you all studying here? Yeah? Anyone else? Yeah.
Centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges. In centralized exchanges, you have an intermediary who charges like on decentralized exchanges, you have the free market, so liquidity providers who deposit into a pool. There will be normally a pair of assets, right, that you're going to trade against each other, and you need to compensate for the fact that you don't have automatic order flow, like you don't have market makers to bootstrap your liquidity, and so you have liquidity providers, but they need to be incentivized somehow, and so you distribute trading fees to them as sort of an incentive, and the liquidity providers can dictate. Well, now they can dictate where they want to provide liquidity. So before, when we first started with decentralized exchanges, the Uniswap V1, they were just a general curve, so X times Y equals to. And the curve is designed in such a way that when it goes to the extremes, you have massive match. And you also have variants of that. You have linear and linear range. You only care about the very small price change. And then Uniswap V2 was about, Uniswap V3 was about changing that curve to provide liquidity for concentrated ranges. So that now instead of passively managing your liquidity, you have active management. And so liquidity providers will move wherever they want to provide liquidity according to the price. And so you sort of had higher liquidity. For traders who want to trade on that pool, they suffer from less price impact, I guess. But the trade-off is that they have to be more active in their management for the liquidity providers. And then Trader Joe changed the game by, instead of having ranges of different bins, and each bin function as its own, I guess. Is that right?
No, it's constant. Like within the same bin, the price is the same.
Okay.
But
And once a bin is empty, price moves accordingly.
yep.
Indeed.
It's a summary.
Who liked this description? Was it better? Understandable?
Everyone kind of understand what X, Y, added AMM. I think we should go back a little bit to the other aspects, okay? Or like, why is this like, why was this model so revolutionary? You know, when Uniswap came to about 3 years ago, sorry, 4 years ago, why was it so like revolutionary for, you know, this basically started DeFi, right? Before this, there was no DeFi. It was just order books, finance, Ether Delta, whatever. There's no such thing as AMMs. Like, why did this suddenly change how we look at exchanging tokens in decentralized way?
Because it's transparent and you know what to expect.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just that you can see what's going on and you know how your particular order affected people play.
Yeah, I mean, the AMM basically stands for automated market maker, right? So, you know, you see that curve there. It basically never touches the X or Y axis. So therefore, it can cover the entire price curve for 2 tokens. So it means that like every person can market make. Doesn't matter if you're Jump or Wintermute or some retail noob, like you can be a market maker, right? And the reason why it was so revolutionary is because suddenly everyone is a market maker now. You don't have to be sophisticated. You don't have to have specialized bots or special hardware to market make like they do in TradFi. So this is like what we started off with, right? When we started off Trader Joe, we were a fork of Uniswap. Uniswap completely changed the game. But the issue with this is that, you know, it makes no sense to add liquidity from the entire price curve. If I say, okay, we're going to add liquidity for USDC, why do I care if I want to add liquidity from $0 to infinity dollars? You don't want to do that, right? Like logically, you want to add maybe $1 plus or minus maybe 10 cents, you know, just to accumulate for some depegging scenarios that happened over the weekend. So that's why we came about with this whole concentrated liquidity model, right? That means that instead of adding liquidity between 0 to infinity, you can now decide, okay, I want to add liquidity between 90 cents to $1.10. And therefore, some of that idle liquidity in the tail end of the price curve is actually being used properly. Does that kind of make sense, guys?
Okay. So that's
Yeah.
you know, you don't want to provide liquidity for price of 0 to infinity.
Yeah.
Is that basically saying you don't want people to trade your assets at that price range?
Well, no, in Uniswap V2, when you add liquidity, you're adding it throughout the entire price curve. So let's say like you add liquidity for the ETH USDC pool, right? When you add liquidity, everyone is adding the same liquidity across 0 to infinity dollars. Now, you know, maybe one day people will become $1 billion, but it's probably not very likely anytime soon, right? So your liquidity that's sitting in the very extreme ends, from like 0 or close to infinity, is actually being wasted. That's why like concentrated liquidity like Uniswap V3 was so revolutionary, because actually now you have capital efficiency, right? You've probably heard it many times, like capital efficiency this, capital efficiency that. You know, this is why we have concentrated liquidity. So Uniswap V3 was the first kind of model to do this. We kind of changed it in some ways using this kind of price curve called instead of constant product, we use constant sum, and we coined it liquidity book. But it's still the same idea. It's still like concentrated liquidity at the end of the day. Sorry, you guys continue.
So yeah, as said, you can choose where you want to add liquidity, so like the capital efficiency. So for example, let's take the spot one, which is probably the easiest, and the wide one. Those are the easiest. You have the actual price.
Can you write on that side? Just kidding.
Yeah, this looks like a board. So this is your liquidity, and you want to, for example, let's stay to the USDC USDT because this is probably the easiest example to understand. So USDC and USDT should have the same value almost 99% of the time. So you want a lot of your liquidity to be close to 1. So let's say you want a lot of safety. You want to add to 09 to 11. And so in that range, you would be able to add, it's not really right. Yep. So something like that. So you will add liquidity only to 09 to 11, which means that when someone swap between those two prices, so moving back and forth, you will receive fees from it. If it was using UniV2, you would have something like that. So like this, sorry. So the actual area of this rectangle will be the same as this one, so it's just tiny. And but with V2, you can trade. It's so badly written. With V2, you can trade on any price because there will be liquidity until infinity, like that. And with the any concentrated liquidity model, you will bound your liquidity to be only from this to that, meaning that the actual area of your liquidity is way higher than this one. Like this rectangle is bigger than this one, meaning that you will actually have more fees with this shape than this one. You're just concentrated. And if you want to concentrate even further, let's say you want 0.95 to 105, sorry, 105, you will have a bigger rectangle, probably like twice as big, just because this part was put there and this one was here as well. So like it's even more concentrated, but now you have a way higher rectangle, which means this, so like let's say this is Bob and this is Alice. Bob will receive more fees than Alice, even though they gave the same dollar value, like the liquidity of Bob and Alice, they both gave like, let's say 5K USDC and USDT or whatever. Like both have the same value, but Bob will receive twice as more fees than Alice, just because he concentrated in more. But if the price goes to out of Bob's liquidity provisioning, he will actually receive no fees because it's out of its range. And that's why you need to manage your liquidity way more than in V2, because in V2 you were always in the active, like the swapping range, and with concentrating now you can be out of your range. For stable coins, most of the time you will stay inside this range. So Bob's is probably just getting more fees than Alice because it's more concentrated. But
we have two questions actually. We have two questions.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So theoretically speaking, say every single liquidity provider within the same range is distributed to each other. I don't see how incentive is concentrated.
So you're saying if Alice and Bob was, yeah, so like they are both getting the same fees, Bob's and Alice, but what will be, in fact, like whatever the range is, but like let's say Alice is there and Bob is here, they will receive both the same fees, but what happens is when someone will actually swap, so we are using still the same market, let's say I want to swap 5K of my own USDC to USDT. This is worth, let's say, 10K. With concentrated liquidity, I would receive probably like, let's say 9.8K or whatever. So this is what drives the price like from the beans itself. But if you were using UniV2, you would have less liquidity. So for the same swap, so the 10K, you would move way further than the actual concentrated. So now I will, let's say, just get 8K. I will never do a swap that would, like, I would just get wrecked because I'm receiving almost, I'm literally receiving 20% less of what I gave. So I will probably just do a tinier swap here. And so in the end, Bob and Alice will receive less fees because the swap range is just shorter. Like people will probably never sell at more than plus or minus 1%. And so just this liquidity will be used in case of UniV2, while all this will be used in the concentrated liquidity model. So in fact, you will get more fees just because more swap will happen. And then the fees that you will get will just be dictated by like the model itself, how much fees it takes. If it takes the same fees as V2, you will still get more just because you have like more trading volume, and that's just it.
Like, let's imagine in this picture that everyone, like 99% of the people in this room are providing liquidity in this wide range, but you are the only one that actually has liquidity in this range because no one thought the price will go there. And you are literally the only one. You will be the only person earning fees on all these beans that are being crossed to that point. While the most crowded space, there are 99 people all sharing the 0.2% fees for each single $1,000, $1 of volume that is traded on this section. So sometimes being the only provider of a specific range could be better than joining a crowded space where everyone else is sharing the same fees because there is too much liquidity for the little volume. It's just a balance of where you think the activity will happen, because more activity, more fees collected for everyone, but some smart people could desire to be the liquidity providers of ranges where no one is there, and then being the only people or a few people actually collecting fees while offering liquidity in that area. And we also... Next slide then. This is more like scenarios of how liquidity could be distributed, so that we try to figure out how could some, let's say, strategies, but we are not here to suggest you to do anything of this. We are here more to explain how liquidities could be distributed differently and why discretizing liquidity is way different than just providing liquidity to an entire XY equal K curve. And this is because you can actually provide liquidity in different shapes. We offer some predetermined shapes on our DEX for liquidity providers, but actually anyone could interact directly with the smart contracts or by hand deploy liquidity however they wish in different type of concentration or extension. So you were asking, like, why would someone want to do wide? And the specific use case of wide is, you might think that Bitcoin will trade for the next year from 20,000 to 40,000, and you want to deploy a very wide range where your key focus in that range from 20,000 to 40,000 is to earn fees, because you expect price to go up and down, and you, even if the movement is maybe 100% movement, the fees collected, so the APR collected over this period of time could be 200, 300 APR based on the movement happening and the fees collected within the range. So you expect to collect more fees than what the movement is. Every single shape is basically a trade-off between where I want to deploy my liquidity and where I expect volume to happen and therefore fees to be collected, because especially with concentrated liquidity, liquidity providers are making a concentrated bet that the volume and fees earned by this liquidity providing will beat the impermanent loss that happens by providing liquidity in a very concentrated range. So if price moves, for example, in one of these curves completely to the right or to the left, you are basically stuck, let's call it, with 100% of one token, because the entire position, you are deploying liquidity from 999 to the 1 or 15. So if price moves entirely to the right side, what you end up holding in your wallet is a position 100% on the green side. So you have 100% of the green in that case. Whatever happens to green, you will have green. And that's what the impermanent loss specific topic is about, that it might not be extremely efficient for you, but that's the choice you have made in the specific liquidity providing, that you want to earn fees in that shape. Maybe that's...
I just have a few points. Why someone would use the ultra wide or wide function distribution is because even if it's really wide, it will always be shorter than infinity. So you will always getting more fees than if you were distributing through V2, because any range is less than infinity. Just yeah, and what happens is if you don't want to manage it that much, if you use a bigger range, as said by Davide, you will not end up with only 100% of one token. So let's say Bob and Alice, to take the example again, Bob use an ultra-wide distribution while Alice use which one? Let's say the wide one. So like it's the same distribution, but just this one is tighter than the ultra-wide one. Bob and Alice, Alice will need to manage it way more frequently than Bob, because the price will move across its range way quicker than Bob. But Alice will gain more fees by doing so, just because it's more concentrated. So it's like a balance on how much you want to manage it and how much risk you want to take. Because if you go out of your range, you are kind of wrecked. And it's just a balance of how much you want to manage, how much risk you are okay to take, and how much fees you get.
So like the wide range, it's we say the wide range here is 50 bins. You have $5,000, $5,000, and that means that when you do that type of deployment, you are going to have $100 inside each bin, and that's it. So when price moves entirely from the left to the right, for each single bin, you are going to collect the fees, the 0.3% fees, for each bin that is traversed for your $100. So it moves one bin, it's $100 times 0.30% fees, and that's what you have earned. The wider you go, the less you have distributed. So if you go ultra wide, let's imagine 500 bins, then you have $10, not $100 for each bin. It means that every time a bin is crossed, you have earned 10% less fees for that specific movement.
So is it right to say that if you the multiple then white option? Is that right? Because it is basically going up and down. It's not really.
Volatility is actually the most. Yes, wide is for a case where volatility is actually happening. So you want to be within the you will want to be within the price range of this volatile movement for as long as possible, because that's your objective, being in the price. If you offer 10% width in your wide deployment and price goes plus 15%, you're out of the position. It means that you are earning zero fees from 10 to 15%. If you're concentrated, so you will want to redeploy it, rebalance it, and that's why being wider when you expect maybe, or when you have a certain have a certain range that you want to deploy within, can offer you to stay within the position for longer, knowing that still a portion of your position is still earning fees, and it might come back or might move still within that specific range.
Like, one, if it's volatile, right? You want your position to always be in range. So therefore, you want a wide position. The question is, like, do you want it to be a uniform wide, or do you want it to be like a normal distribution Gaussian wide? Because I know it's wide, right? It depends on the volatility, and actually, there's a lot of research that people are actually trying to do research right now, looking at past data in Uniswap positions to figure out what is the best shape. You know the range, how big it is, should be, but is it better to be uniform, or is it better to be concentrated over a certain center? We don't know yet. I think logically, people think normal, yes, it seems better. But I think so far, and we actually have our own quants and research team crushing data too. One of the nice things about the liquidity book, for example, is that you can actually define your own shape. You can't use Uniswap V3 is always uniform across one certain range. We're trying to prove that it's actually better to be normal, and therefore you should use the liquidity book over Uniswap V3.
Like I personally like curved when there is a volatile time, personally, no financial advice here in general, but why, for example, when price goes up and down in a constant movement, the center is actually hit more frequently. Price tends to be around what some traders call point of control, and the point of control is usually the middle of a movement. That is the price points or the range where the most of the volume is happening, and then it moves in a volatile way up and down. This is only valid in sideways volatile movements, for example, where using a curve might be more interesting than just a wide, because the extremes of a wide movement might be touched just for a few seconds, while the central point of the movement might be explored multiple times by a price. But this is all like market theories. You never know. It's about the single individual liquidity provider trying to figure out where they want to be and what's best for them. We have a question.
So assuming we were talking about two stable coins that are back to the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that volatility would basically be close to zero. Well,
yes.
1-to-1. So how are you making money? I suppose there's always some volatility, and that's where you're actually winning. But if volatility was zero, you're not making money. You're just exchanging 1-to-1. There's no.
Yeah, but within the bin, as the price is constant, even if it's 1-to-1, some people will want to buy some USDC or some USDT to take some two stables coin for whatever reason. They want to buy one or sell the other, and as the price is constant, you will just swap 1-to-1 for the other, and that's how you are getting fees from the swap itself. A share of the, like, let's say you're swapping 10K, a share of the 10K you will go to the liquidity providers. So you will still get money if the price doesn't move, as long as there is volume. Does that answer?
So 99%, if not 99.5% of the volume will happen at the 1-1 bin. So if you want to provide liquidity for a stable coin, yes, your interest is mostly putting it at the 1-to-1 ratio. However, scenarios where liquidity is completely emptied from the 1-1 scenario might happen due to whatever is happening over a weekend like last week. And that's where the beans slightly outside might get more exposure because one single swapper holding billions, well, let's say millions of one stable might want to get all in the other. The token goes to 1,000,001, which maybe is completely empty and you're the only liquidity provider. All of a sudden, you are earning a lot more fees than being the 99.9% of that single bean as a market bid, one amongst the 99.9 in that single bean.
I think I understand now. Even if it's 1-to-1, you're charging a fee. So the person selling token and the other side buying the other token, they're not actually one. It's slightly.
They don't have any price impact, but they do have swap fees. Yes. And I just realized we forgot to mention one key point is how the price is increasing between beans, which is the bean step, and just mentioning it quickly. If you have, like, let's say bean 1, 2, 3, and if the price here of this bean is, let's say 1, the price of the next bean will be the current price, so 1 times the bean step, 1 plus the bean step, which means, for example, bean step will actually describe how volatile a pair is. So if you are in a stable coin, the bean step will be the lowest one, which is 1 bips. And so from this one to this one, it will increase just by 0.01%. So the price here will be 1.0001. And the next one would be 1.0002 and some numbers and etc. And that's how the price moves. And in the other direction, it's the same thing, but just divided by the 1 plus bean step. And yeah, if you have a volatile pair, the bean step will be greater. Yeah, like for example, the Joe AVAX or AVAX USDC has a higher bean step. So it means that you will stay longer in one bean before crossing it because the price difference is actually greater. It might be like in a stablecoin, it will be 0.01%. With AVAX USDC, for example, it's 0.20%. So actually, if it fits 1, this one would be 1.0020.
So here we have some numbers that now, after having all this conversation, can explore again, because now we are ready. So we have the root with some numbers, which are the fees, and then we have the price impact. Can you explain a bit more the difference between price impact and fees in this specific swap?
So that's a good thing. The 0.15 that you see here and the 0.2% that you see here are actually the swap fees that the user pays to swap. So that means in the 10K Joe through the 2K5 USDC, you're actually paying 35.2 Joe. So it's an average of those two is like 0.3% of swap fees or something like that.
So this is a multi-root. As
You're
you can
using
see.
2 pairs with that swap.
Why that?
Sorry?
Why are we going through 2 different pairs?
Because you have a better price using 2 pairs.
So in this case, we are making a swap from a Joe token from USDC. We have liquidity pools of Joe AVAX and liquidity pools AVAX USDC. The DEX is automatically calculating that in order to give you the best price, the best way to make the transaction is through this multi-hop path. So it will swap it first to AVAX and then to USDC within the same transaction, all happening on chain. So charging the overall end user 0.35% fees, which end up to be more efficient than other paths that could have happened.
And the price impact is in fact the number of beans you crossed averaged, because like it's not just but like to simplify it, as it's 0.12% price impact, and the Joe AVAX and AVAX USDC have roughly the same bin step, it means that you moved 6 bins, because this one is 0.2, no, 0.2, sorry. So as it's 0.12%, it means that you moved 6 bins. So you move 6 bins and you add the fees. And so if you were in the same bin, so like in the stable coin where you are very concentrated in this one, the price impact would be actually 0, but you would just pay the fees itself. And yeah.
So you see the 35.2 fees of Joe, they will go to all liquidity providers that have provided liquidity within the bins that are currently crossed. As of now, the price was 0.234339. So besides the price impact, so a few bins will be explored. Let's say 5, for example. We cross 5 bins. Only the liquidity providers within that 5 single bins will receive all proportionally or share of the 35.2 Joes from this transaction.
So the fee function is actually quite complicated, but we have two fees. We have the base fee and the variable fee. The base fee is the easiest one. It's just a percentage of what you are sending. So here you are sending 10K Joe. If the base fee is, let's say, 1% because it's easy, you will send 100 Joe as the base fee. Then we have the variable fee, which is a function of the volatility itself. When the market is very volatile, the variable fee will increase, and when it's stale, the variable fee will almost be 0. And so most of the time, the user are only paying the base fee, and when the market is very volatile, you add the variable fee on top of the base fee, so it's actually increasing the fee that the user pays, and it's to incentivize the LP to provide liquidity even during high volatile market movements, because they are actually gaining more fees than when it's just stale. Because when you are an LP, you are kind of afraid of the volatility, and most of the time, as in like most market making, you're getting the same percent when it's volatile or not. And so most of the time you want to actually withdraw when it's volatile, and when it just crabs around, then it's the right time to LP. And LB tried to solve this issue by actually increasing the fees when it's volatile, so that you have a reason to stay even if it's volatile.
Any other question?
Yeah, that's what I explained. The variable fee, basically. When you cross a lot of bins, it means the volatility increased because the price is just changing a lot to the right or changing a lot to the left. And that's the blue, the red chart is the bins that are crossed, and the blue chart is the variable fee. So what actually the user is paying is just a representation, but when it's very volatile, when we see big peaks, the variable fee is increasing, and then it's slowly decreasing. It's kind of the function of the way it cools down is just the heat formula. Like when you pull something that is hot, it just decrease exponentially. And we are using the same function so that when it increases a lot, so you are like heating something, it will just cool down very fast at start and then slows down. And so that's why it's decreasing very fast and then slower. And that's, yeah, the variable.
So why surge pricing? Like when you call an Uber and you know you need to get out, you need to get back home, but everyone wants to get back home. That happens also in crypto. There's times where volatility is very high and everyone wants to move from one position to the other. And being a liquidity provider in these situations is let's call it a bit more risky, because volatility means your position might get out of the price. So in order to compensate liquidity providers that want to stay in the position, we have created a system that charges more fees to the person that is trying to swap their tokens in that specific situation of high volatility, because in these specific market situations, transactions will probably go through anyway. The swapper is less interested about the price impact that might get higher of a few cents, while they just want to get the transaction go through. The liquidity provider wants to know that they are being compensated for this time of potentially higher volatility. And that's why we have implemented the surge pricing system, in order to create a second higher way for the liquidity provider to be compensated for the impermanent loss. And now I think is a good time a bit to make this more understandable and interesting for all of you that are students here. Like, let's talk also a bit about Louis. Like, how old are you, Louis?
I'm 23 and I graduated 8 months ago. And I started Trader Joe about 2 years ago. So when I was still in school, and I was like juggling between my engineering school and Trader Joe. And yeah.
Like, if you find this all interesting and you think maybe today is complicated, I'm sure it was complicated also for Louis when he started. Well, okay. It was okay. But the one of the key topics here is that in DeFi and in general in crypto, there is indeed always an opportunity for people to learn. So smart contracts are written in Solidity, for example. So what is a smart contract developer? What do you do? What do you do in your daily job outside of writing formulas? Instead of writing formulas, what do you do?
So basically, I'm writing smart contracts. The idea most of the time is to replicate some products that are that already exist in the TradFi market, and we want to make it decentralized. So for that, you need a smart contract, and I basically write the smart contract so that you can do I don't know, like swaps or lending or whatever. Those things are done like using a smart contract. And
in which languages? Which languages did you know before?
Solidity. So what?
Which languages did you know before? How did you move into Solidity?
I was mostly Java and Python. And Solidity is actually quite close to JavaScript in some way, but like not 100% of it. But if you understand JavaScript, which is an easy language, you will be able to read smart contracts, not really write them, but like you will understand them, which is interesting because the fact that Solidity is an easy language is probably one of the reasons it performed that well, is because everyone is able to just take a smart contract, read it, and understand what it does most of the time when it's not that complicated. Whereas other languages or other blockchain using other languages, sometimes it's way harder to understand, and at the same time it's way harder to get new developers just because the language is so complicated and no one knows it, that it's just hard to get anyone involved in the space. So yeah.
Any developer or aspiring developer here?
It's computer science, so yeah.
Like, who writes code here? I want to see hands. Writing code? One guy writes code here. You're gonna make it.
What languages are most of the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Computer science. Any medics here?
Doubt.
I was an imperial medic, just to let you know. Back in the day.
Yeah, even doctors can make it in crypto, becoming the coders, you know. So there is an opportunity for everyone here.
Yeah, and just about if you are interested in writing smart contracts, you can even write them in Python. There is a library, forgot its name. Crap. Viper. Viper is the language. If you want to write smart contracts in Python, you can use Viper as well. And it works great, but it's not the most used one. The most used one is still Solidity across all EVMs. But yeah. And
yeah, I think that we are getting to the end and open to any further question maybe or something that you would like to ask. Okay, good ends. You go.
For example, if so, you said it's liquidity providers getting traded in a certain pool, they get proportionate distribution. So if this particular, for example, like go with USDC example, which is like if it has this pool has 100K and Alice has 10K in there and Bob has 20K in there. So which tokens, like whose tokens are getting swapped if there is a swap, or they get swapped proportionally? So
proportionally, like
do you, once all of your tokens has been swapped, do you start getting fees, or what does that?
so if like if we use another example, like I think that yeah, if you have let's still use the stablecoin example. So you have a big range. Let's say Alice is there, and this is Bob, but Alice has some liquidity here. Let's say she has this and this. So Alice is a bit more distributed, while Bob is very concentrated in the one-to-one price. Okay, I can remove this. What will happen is when you are inside this range, so let's say this is whatever, 09, sorry, to 11, Bob and Alice will receive fees when it's swapping inside that range. And as soon as all the liquidity here is swapped to the other token, so let's say the price is out now, so we are here, Bob will receive no more fees, so you will receive 0 fees during the swaps because only Alice is providing liquidity here. So if Bob still wants to earn fees, he needs to rebalance. So he needs to take out his position and build its position again in the active bin. So the only bin that is receiving fees is the active one, which is where the swap happens. So if you are 100% of one token, it means that all the tokens were swapped. It means that you are no more the active bin, so you are not getting fees anymore. So that's why you might want a wider range or to rebalance manage. Like each bin will have its own reserves, and it's when the reserves of the bin is swapped entirely, you will not get any fees in that bin itself. So it's not really like if you have a wide range, so like that. Even if you are 100% of like the price move from there to there. So here it's 100% Y. So it's let's say it's 100% USDC or whatever. You will still get fees because this part is still in your liquidity provisioning. Like you are still getting fees, but all this liquidity here is now useless unless the price goes back. And that's why you want it to be concentrated. It's like to get whatever the price movement happens, you want to be in it basically. go ahead.
So if we look, for example, at the column, at the bin up there, that we have, let's say, a 30-60%, it doesn't mean that your tokens might be the only 30 and someone else's has the 60. If that's the configuration of the bin, what happens is that everyone has 30% of green and everyone has 30% of violet in that specific active bin situation for how it was deployed. So everyone is going to get the same amount of fees. And if the percentage decreases from 30 to 20, every provider that has that bin as one of their deployed bins will decrease from 30 to 20 altogether. It's not one single provider that will have their proportion, but everyone will be in that proportion.
And I think you had a question, I think? No? Sorry? So it's our quant team that are defining it. Most of the time, it's about the volatility. So if, like when we open a pair, let's say you want to open ETH BTC and ETH USDC. Most of the time, ETH and BTC does about the same movement. Like if BTC is moving up, most of the time ETH is following. Whereas when ETH is moving up, USDC is just like staying at the same level. So it means that in fact this pool will be more volatile than this one. So this would have a higher bin step than this one. So if this one is like a, let's say 0.010, or let's say percent, 0.10%, this one might be 0.15% or whatever, but it will be greater just because this one is more volatile. And how do we choose the actual value is how wide the volatility of those two tokens is to make sure that within 100 bin, let's say, you will be able to catch all the movements of the last, I don't know, month price movements. Welcome.
Cool. Anyone else?
Yep. Like, let's say you add 50% of both, so that's the easiest metrics, and some swap happened, and now you have 40% of, I don't know, ETH and 60% of USDC. You don't need to wait for all the ETH to be converted to USDC to withdraw. You can withdraw at any time, but you will get this amount of token and not this one. Like the current percentage of your balance will be, you will be able to withdraw it at any time. But it will always be this one, not this one, unless a swap happen in the other direction to move your like bins to the previous value.
Liquidity positions are passive, and you have to use third party, as they're called vaults, in order to deploy your position and delegate to them the management of these positions if you want them to be rebalanced. So we are actually working on our own auto pools, as they're called, managed vaults, which you can deploy your tokens there, and according to strategies, we will rebalance them just to follow the active price and to be as wide as the strategy says, so that you don't have to be any more passive. The default liquidity providing in considered liquidity is, as always, passive static from price point A to B, and that's it. There are, however, solutions which employ oracles or other type of strategies that actively look at what the price is and then follow it, but they are specific contracts that actually do this. Always on chain and always decentralized. You delegate your tokens on them and execute strategies on chain. Very interesting aspect also. And we know that that's what people prefer overall. So we are actually deploying this so that you can just deploy and forget.
All right, thank you, Davide and Lewis. Can we just have one last round of applause? And yeah,